Hello everyone, and welcome. I hope this story gives you a chance to relax and unwind after a busy day. If you enjoy stories like this, please support the channel with a like, a share, and a subscription. Your support truly means a lot to me, and it gives me the motivation to keep growing this channel and bringing you more entertaining and enjoyable stories. Thank you so much for being here, and now, let's begin the story. The first sign that something was wrong was not the missing people. It was the heartbeat. Sabrina Thorne stood inside a glass-walled intake booth on Dock 3 of Veronine, watching a thin green line crawl across a cheap medical monitor. The line belonged to a worker named Owen Rivas, and according to the payroll ledger, Owen Rivas did not exist. Sabrina was not a diplomat, and she was not military. She was a labor inspector for Earth Civil Workforce Authority, the kind of person companies tolerated only because unions had learned long ago that paperwork could save lives. Her badge was valid on Earth jurisdictions and on any site that had signed a Human Labor Access Clause, and Kepri Combine had signed one. Confirm it again, Sabrina said. Jonas Pike, the technician assigned to her field team, leaned over the monitor and tapped the interface. He was younger than she was, with the careful posture of someone who had grown up around machines that punish mistakes. "It's live," he said. "Biotelemetry is coming from a registered wrist ring. Pulse, temperature, oxygen. The ring ID matches Owen Rivas. The timestamp is current. And the ledger?" Jonas flicked to another screen. A clean table of names, hours, and pay rates filled the pane. There is no Owen Rivas. In fact, there are 42 names missing. 42 human workers had vanished from the payroll 3 days ago, yet their safety rings, mandatory on any hazardous extraction site, still whispered that their bodies were breathing. Sabrina felt the old sour sensation behind her ribs. She had walked into plenty of bad situations before, but this was different. This was someone taking a person's legal existence and erasing it with a keystroke. She turned to the dock beyond the booth. Kepri's personnel officers waited by a security arch, flanked by 2 private guards. Their uniforms carried the Combine's crest, a stylized scarab over a gear. Near them stood Varkale, the site overseer. He was tall, jointed like a mantis, and his eyes were a matte gray that never blinked at the right times. Varkale watched Sabrina without moving, like someone who had already decided how this would go. Sabrina stepped out of the booth and walked to the security arch. She made sure her stride stayed calm. A labor inspector survived by never showing the first crack. "Inspector Thorne," Varkale said. His English was crisp and practiced. "Welcome to Veronine. We received your notice." "You received my notice and prepared a reception," Sabrina said, glancing at the guards. "That tells me you didn't think I'd come alone. We treat Earth compliance visits with respect. That is one way to describe armed escorts." Varkale's mouth plates flexed in what might have been a smile. "Safety is a priority. This is a heavy industrial environment. So are most places where people die quietly," Sabrina said. A second figure stepped forward, smooth in a charcoal suit that caught the dock lights like oil. Ilya Sorin was human, corporate counsel for Kepri Combine, assigned to Veronine for legal harmonization. Sabrina recognized the type immediately. Polished, calm, and trained to make cruelty sound like accounting. "Inspector," Ilya said, "we want to cooperate. There has been confusion in the administrative system. A legacy roster was purged during an update. It is already being corrected." 42 names, Sabrina said. "Purged. Removed from an active list," Ilya corrected. "No one has been harmed. Production continues." Sabrina looked past him at the conveyor tracks running from the dock into the moon's interior. Heavy carts rolled by magnetic rails, their loads strapped beneath tarps. She could hear distant drills, like slow thunder under stone. "Where are they?" she asked. Varkale lifted one hand. "The workers you referenced were reassigned. Their roles became non-active." "Non-active?" Sabrina repeated. Ilya's voice stayed soft. "There are contract classifications under local jurisdiction. Certain disputes require internal review before outside oversight." "That is not an answer." "It is," Ilya said, still smiling. "Under the terms Earth signed, Kepri has authority over workforce allocation within Veronine's operational perimeter. Sabrina's mind ran through the clause she had read on the flight. Human labor access, on paper, guaranteed inspectors the ability to verify safety compliance and wage practices for human employees. But it also deferred to local arbitration for operational emergencies. The phrase tasted like rust. Sabrina raised her wrist so her badge scanner caught the dot camera. I am logging this interaction. Under Earth's access clause, I request immediate physical verification of the status of all 42 missing workers. Varkale's eyes shifted a fraction. Denied. Jonas stiffened behind her. Sabrina did not. She had expected resistance. What she had not expected was how quickly they were willing to deny the basics. On what grounds? She asked. Security, Varkale said. The workers are in a restricted sector. Their presence is part of ongoing internal review. In other words, Sabrina said, you will not let me see them because you do not want me to see them. Eli's smile deepened, faintly said. Inspector, I understand how this looks. But Veronine is not Earth. It operates under the trade protection framework recognized by the Galaxy Council. We cannot compromise production stability over administrative noise. Administrative noise is what you call 42 humans disappearing from payroll while their bodies keep breathing, Sabrina said. Varkale tilted his head. Your emotional framing is noted. Sabrina felt her jaw tighten. She forced it loose. If she let anger drive, she would lose. All right, she said. Then I start where my authority is undeniable. Housing, meal logs, and safety ring telemetry. I will reconstruct their last known movements myself. Ilya spread his hands. You are welcome to review any non-restricted records. We will provide a conference room. Sabrina nodded once. Good. And for the record, Varkale, if any one of those rings goes flat while you are reviewing, Earth will treat this as unlawful detention. Varkale's eyes held hers. If the rings go flat, Inspector, it will be because industrial environments are unforgiving. Sabrina did not answer. She turned and walked toward the rail cart that would take them deeper into the moon. As she moved, she caught Jonas's glance. He looked scared, not of the guards, but of what the line meant. 42 people were alive in a place that insisted they were not on paper. That kind of lie did not happen by accident. The rail cart carried them past cargo stacks and into a tunnel that sloped down. Light bars flickered along the ceiling, and the sound of drills grew louder. Sabrina watched her reflection in the cart's window, steady eyes and controlled breathing, and reminded herself what mattered. She had to get names back on a paper, and she had to get bodies back above ground. She had to do it before Veronine's machinery swallowed 42 humans so completely that even the Galaxy Council could pretend it never happened. The conference room was as clean as a corporate brochure. It held a polished table, a wall screen, and a dispenser of hot drinks no one touched. An administrative officer slid a tablet towards Sabrina with a practiced bow and left without making eye contact. Sabrina opened the housing registry. Unit blocks for human workers lined the list, rows of identical cabins drilled into the rock near the lower living deck. 42 units were marked vacant as of 72 hours ago. Yet meal logs showed 42 rations drawn every day since. She pulled up the security footage tied to the living deck. The camera feeds were blank. Not missing. Blank. As if the living deck had simply ceased to exist in the archive. Jonas leaned in. That is not a glitch. That is a wipe. Sabrina nodded. Or a shadow copy. They do not want us to see the moment it happened. She requested maintenance access logs for doors, locks, airlocks, and elevator transfers. The system returned a polite error. The console displayed a line saying access was not permitted under trade protection. Sabrina stared at the message until it stopped looking like words and started looking like a wall. This is not just Veronine, she said quietly. Jonas swallowed, meaning council framework. Meaning the people who wrote those rules knew exactly what they were doing. Sabrina stood and walked to the wall. On the other side of the conference room's glass, the mine's central corridor ran like a vein. Workers in gray suits moved along it, small and hurried under the enormous steel ribs of the station. Some were human. Most were not. Sabrina watched a human woman push a cart of tools with her head down, moving as if she had learned not to look up at the people watching from clean rooms. Sabrina's comm buzzed. An incoming call from Earth. She accepted. A face filled her screen. Director Halima Cho, Earth's compliance liaison for off-world labor. Cho's hair was pulled tight, and her expression already looked tired. Sabrina, Cho said, we got your arrival ping. How bad is it? 42, missing from payroll. Bio rings still live, Sabrina said. Kepri denied physical verification. Records are being actively scrubbed. Cho's eyes narrowed. Denied? Under our clause. Under trade protection. They're hiding behind council-recognized jurisdiction. Cho exhaled through her nose. Sabrina, you know Veronine feeds the Orion shipyards. If Kepri escalates, they can stall shipments across half the frontier. I know, Sabrina said. That does not give them the right to erase people. No, Cho said, but it tells you what you are up against. Keep your tone measured. Do not provoke a legal standoff unless you can win it. Sabrina felt the pressure settle on her shoulders like weight. Director, they're holding people. Do you have proof of detention? Cho asked. I have proof the rings are active, proof payroll is wiped, proof meal rations are drawn. They blocked cameras. That is strong, but not strong enough to walk into restricted sectors and drag bodies out, Cho said. If you do that and get caught, Earth will have to decide whether to back you publicly. I need you to understand that. Sabrina understood. She had lived in bureaucracy long enough to know that institutions protected themselves first. If I do not move, Sabrina said, those people disappear for real. Cho's gaze softened for half a second. Then move smart. Find the seam. Do not let them define the frame. The call ended. Sabrina stared at the darkened screen. She could feel the mind's vibration through the floor, constant and patient, like a giant heart. She returned to the table and opened the safety ring telemetry. 42 signals pulsed deep below. One signal, Owen Rivas, held steady, then dipped, then steadied again like someone climbing and then stopping to breathe. Sabrina traced the location marker. It sat beneath a sector labeled inactive extraction. Inactive, yet the rings were there. Jonas watched her finger. Restricted. Everything that matters is restricted, Sabrina said. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. There are always people in any system who hate what the system is doing. People who do small things to survive their own conscience. We need one. You mean a whistleblower? Jonas said. Call what you want, Sabrina said. I call it a person who is tired of pretending. She stood. Come on. We're going to the living deck. The cameras are blank, Jonas warned. That is why we go, Sabrina said. If they wiped the footage, something happened there. And if they wiped it, there will be residue. Everyone leaves residue. They rode an elevator down into the rock. The air grew warmer and heavier. At the living deck, the corridor lights were dim, set to a night cycle. The cabins marked vacant were lined in a row. Their doors were sealed, not locked. Sealed with a polymer strip that would break if opened. Sabrina ran her fingers along one seal. It was new, fresh adhesive. Someone had wanted these doors to look untouched. She crouched beside the floor vent outside cabin 17 and listened. At first, she heard nothing but the faint hum of the air system. Then, very faintly, a tap. 2 quick knocks from inside the wall. Jonas froze. Sabrina held up a hand and leaned closer to the vent. Another tap came, then a pause, then one long scratch like a nail dragged along metal. Someone was close. Someone was alive. Someone was trying to be heard without triggering alarms. Sabrina sat back on her heels. Her heart did not race. It went cold and steady. Okay, she whispered. We are not alone. She stood, straightened her jacket, and looked down the corridor toward the intersection where the lights were brighter. Footsteps approached. A maintenance worker rounded the corner, pushing a cart of filters. They were not human. Their skin was mottled blue, and their eyes were wide and cautious. They saw Sabrina's badge and stiffened. Sabrina stepped into the corridor, blocking the path just enough to force a choice. Maintenance, she said gently. I need a minute. The worker's gaze flicked to the sealed cabin doors, then back to Sabrina. Their hands tightened on the cart handle. My supervisor. I'm not asking you to break rules, Sabrina said. I am asking you a question. Are there people behind those doors? The worker's throat bobbed. Their eyes darted again toward the doors, as if afraid the doors could listen. Sabrina lowered her voice. I cannot help anyone if I do not know where they are. The worker hesitated. Then, almost invisibly, they moved one hand and tapped the cart side panel twice. A code, not random. A signal. Jonas leaned closer. What does that mean? Sabrina watched the worker's face. It means you know, she said. And you are terrified. The worker's jaw tightened. You should leave, they whispered. They watch. Not here, but above. Who? Sabrina asked. The worker swallowed. Kepri. And the packed auditors. They say humans are flexible. That you adjust. Sabrina felt a flare of anger and kept it under control. Give me something, she said. One detail. One crack. The worker's eyes met hers for a heartbeat. Then they whispered 2 words. Lower hatches. Then they pushed the cart past her and hurried away. Sabrina stared after them. Lower hatches could mean old service access points connecting living decks to unused extraction shafts. Places not in the main maps. Jonas exhaled. We cannot just go down there. We can't, Sabrina said. We just cannot get caught. She touched the seal on cabin 17 again. The tapping had stopped. Whoever was inside had risked it once. They would not risk it twice. Sabrina walked back to the elevator. As they rose, she made a decision that felt like stepping off a ledge. She would not wait for Earth to authorize the next move. She would find the workers first. Because if the Galaxy Council was willing to let a contract erase a person, then the only thing standing between those 42 lives and the void was a labor inspector who refused to treat a heartbeat like administrative noise. Sabrina slept for 2 hours in a small guest cabin that smelled like disinfectant and old air. When she woke, she had the sensation of being watched even before she opened her eyes. It was not paranoia. It was experience. Sites like Veronine did not hide 42 people without keeping track of anyone who came looking. She washed, pulled her hair into a tight knot, and met Jonas in the corridor. We have one hint, Jonas said. Lower hatches. And we have one problem, Sabrina said. They denied access, scrubbed footage, and now they know we are poking. Jonas nodded toward the ceiling. Sensors. Sabrina tapped her wrist calm. We move like we're doing routine compliance. We do not run. We do not whisper in corners. We act like we belong. They started with the things Kepri could not easily block. Waste flow, air filtration, and power load. Every living body produced heat, carbon dioxide, and waste. If 42 people had been relocated, the systems feeding them would show it somewhere. Jonas pulled up the environmental dashboard the admin officer had grudgingly allowed. Sectors see ventilation spikes at night, he said. Not huge, but consistent. Sector C is listed as inactive extraction, Sabrina said. Same label as the ring coordinates. Jonas scrolled. And waste filtration is higher there too, like a small population. Sabrina's mind clicked into place. Lower hatches connect the living deck to older shafts. Older shafts connect to inactive extraction. They move them through places no one monitors because the paperwork says they are empty. She logged the anomaly as an airflow audit request. It was boring enough to pass. Then she requested a physical inspection of filtration units in Sector C. A denial came back within seconds. The console displayed the same polished refusal. Sabrina stared at the screen until the message felt like an insult with a smile. All right, she said. We do not ask. Jonas hesitated. If we go down without authorization, they can arrest me, Sabrina said. But they cannot unsee what I record. She pulled a small recorder from her bag, an old-fashioned device that stored audio and video locally, not on a network. She clipped it under her collar. If you get separated, she told Jonas, your job is to get data out, not to be brave. Jonas's throat tightened. And yours? My job is to get people out, Sabrina said. They returned to the living deck on the pretense of verifying cabin occupancy. Sabrina moved with slow certainty and watched for cameras, guards, and any change in routine. Near the sealed cabin row, she found a maintenance panel half hidden behind a vending unit. The metal around it was scuffed, as if it had been opened recently. If the maintenance worker's whisper meant anything, a lower hatch would be tied into service access. Jonas knelt and ran a scanner over the panel latch. "It is keyed to maintenance codes," he murmured. "But the casing is cheap. If we—" Sabrina held up a hand. She listened. The corridor was quiet but not empty. Far down the hall, a door opened, then shut. Someone was moving. "Not now," she whispered. "We need a window." They backed away and walked the deck in a slow loop, noting patrol patterns. 2 guards passed every 14 minutes, and a drone floated by on a set route every 9. There was a 3-minute gap when both were at the opposite end. Sabrina counted. She hated that she was counting. When the gap came, they moved. Jonas popped the panel with a thin pry tool. The latch gave with a soft snap. Behind it, a ladder dropped into a narrow shaft. Warm air rose from below, smelling of sweat and mineral dust. Sabrina clipped her recorder tighter, then started down. The shaft was older than the rest of the station, lined with coarse metal and patched welds. Halfway down, the hum of machinery grew louder. Not dormant, working. At the bottom, a hatch opened into a low service corridor. The lights were red, set to emergency power, and pipes ran along the ceiling. Vibrating. Sabrina stepped out and felt it immediately. The weight of a place designed to be unseen. Jonas followed, eyes wide. "This is not in the public maps." "That is the point," Sabrina said. They moved along the corridor until it split. On the left was a door marked storage. On the right was a door marked subprocessing. Both were locked. Sabrina checked the ring telemetry. Owen Rivas's signal was close, below, and ahead. She found a grated vent and crouched. Behind it, human voices murmured in exhaustion. Sabrina's chest tightened. She forced her breathing steady. "Hello," she whispered through the grate. "My name is Sabrina Thorne. I am from Earth." Silence followed. Then, after a long moment, a voice rough with disbelief answered. "You are not supposed to be down here." "I know," Sabrina said. "Are you Owen Rivas?" A pause. "Yes." Sabrina swallowed. "How many are with you?" "Not all." Owen said. "They split us. Rotations. They move us." "Are you hurt?" Sabrina asked. A humorless laugh came back. "We are alive." That is their line. Alive means the contract is fulfilled. Sabrina felt anger burn behind her eyes, but she blinked it away. "I need you to tell me something," she said. "Who is in charge down there?" "Not Varkale," Owen said. He pretends it is not his. "It is the auditors. The pact. They came 2 weeks ago. After that, they changed the paperwork. We stopped being workers. We became units." Sabrina's recorder caught every word. She leaned closer. "Do you know the term they used?" she asked. Owen hesitated. "Contractually extinguished." The phrase hit Sabrina like a slap, not because she had not guessed, but because hearing it from a trapped man's mouth made it real in a way no document could. "Listen," Sabrina said. "I cannot pull you out right now. If I try, we all get caught. But I can get proof. I can force a hearing." Owen's voice went flat. "A hearing will not feed my kids." "I know," Sabrina said. "But without it, you vanish. And if you vanish, you become an example." A soft sound came through the vent, a woman's voice this time. "Are you human?" the woman asked. "Yes," Sabrina said. "Then tell Earth," the woman said. "Tell them we did not quit. Tell them we did not sell ourselves. They made us disappear because we were cheap." Sabrina closed her eyes for a second. She pictured faces she had never seen and families she had never met. She pictured the ledger that had erased them like a cleaning function. "I will tell them," she said, "but I need names. I need you to give me at least 10 names I can verify." Owen spoke slowly, like someone afraid words could be stolen. He gave names, and Sabrina repeated each one back to make sure she heard it right. Jonas's calm chirped softly. A warning ping. Patrol drone nearby. "We have to go," Jonas whispered. Sabrina leaned to the vent one last time. "Hold on," she said. "Do not do anything reckless. If they move you, remember anything you can. Routes, times, symbols, anything." Owen's voice was quiet. "Inspector, what if Earth will not fight?" Sabrina stared at the grate. She could not promise what she could not control. but she could promise what she would do. Then I will, she said. They climbed back up the shaft in silence, sealing the panel behind them seconds before the drone floated past. Back in the conference room, Sabrina called Director Cho again. This time she did not lead with emotion. She led with data. I made contact, she said. I have audio testimony. I have 10 verified names. The missing workers are alive and held in a non-mapped sector tied to trade protection. They are classified as contractually extinguished after packed auditors arrived. It was a long pause. Cho's eyes hardened. You went into restricted areas, Cho said. Yes, Sabrina said. And now we have proof. Sabrina, that was reckless. It was necessary. Cho's gaze shifted slightly, as if reading something off-screen. You understand what you just touched. Contractually extinguished is not a local phrase. It is a legal construct. It shows up in council trade doctrine in very specific contexts. Contexts like slavery, Sabrina said. Do not use that word in an official channel yet. Use coercive labor conversion. We need to keep this inside the system's language if we want the council to listen. Sabrina felt the familiar frustration of bureaucratic language. But she also understood the strategy. If you wanted to break a system, you had to speak in the system's teeth first. Fine, she said. What is Earth's move? Cho hesitated, and Sabrina heard it. The weight of supply lines, treaties, and votes. We can request a trade review hearing, Cho said. But Kepri will claim you are a rogue inspector. They will argue Earth violated the access clause by infiltrating restricted sectors. Then I do not hide it, Sabrina said. I own it. I tell them why I did it. Cho's eyes narrowed. If you do that, they can still sanction you. They can still sanction Earth. Sanction us, Sabrina said. But they cannot make those people vanish again. Cho stared at her for a long beat. Then she nodded once, reluctantly. All right, Cho said. We request the hearing. And Sabrina, if the council summons you, you will go. You will be our witness and our liability. Sabrina's stomach tightened. I understand. After the call, Jonas looked at her. They will make you the problem. They already have, Sabrina said. Outside the conference room, the mine's drills kept pounding. Cargo carts kept rolling. Life kept being measured in tons. Sabrina opened her recorder and replayed Owen's words once, just to make sure she had not imagined the desperation in his voice. Then she started assembling the case that would drag Veronine into the light of the Galaxy Council. Because a contract that could erase a human's legal existence was not just a local crime. It was a rule with council backing. And rules like that only died when someone forced the people who wrote them to say their meaning out loud. 40 hours later, the summons arrived, stamped with the seal of the Galaxy Council's Commerce Chamber. It did not say trial. It did not say tribunal. It said review. The word was calm, professional, and engineered to make horror sound like bookkeeping. Sabrina read the message 3 times, then forwarded it to Cho and locked her calm. Jonas stood by the narrow cabin window, staring at the black void outside. Do you think they will let the workers live long enough for us to speak? He asked. That is why we move. Now, Sabrina said, before the hearing. She knew what would happen next. Once Earth requested review, Kepri Combine would clean house. They would move bodies. They would rewrite logs. They would make the rings go silent in ways that looked like industrial accidents. Sabrina needed 2 things before she left Veronine. More names, and 1 piece of physical evidence that could not be dismissed as a rogue inspector's recording. She requested a final airflow audit in writing. Varkale denied it again. Then, with the politeness of a hammer wrapped in velvet, he informed her that her access would be revoked at shift change. They were giving her a deadline. Sabrina used the deadline. She and Jonas returned to the service panel in the living deck during the narrow gap in patrols. This time they brought a small kit with adhesive signal blockers, a fiber camera, and 2 plain work suits stolen from a laundry cart. They went down. The service corridor smelled worse than before, hot oil, stale sweat, and something metallic that reminded Sabrina of blood, even though she did not see any. At the grated vent, Owen's voice met her like a bruise. You came back, he whispered. I had to, Sabrina said. They're summoning me to council. Before that happens, I need more. A bitter chuckle came from inside. More than us breathing? More names and one artifact, Sabrina said. Something they use down there. A tag, a device, anything that shows you're being processed as property. Silence followed. Then the woman's voice came again, close to the vent. I am Mara Devane, she said. If you're going to make us matter, you need the thing they scan. What thing? Sabrina asked. The collar, Mara said. Not a collar. A band. It sits under the suit. It reads our rings and overwrites our identity on their system. That is how they turn a person into a unit. Sabrina's pulse stayed steady. She hated how calm she could be when the stakes rose. Calm was survival. Can you get one? She asked. Mara hesitated. If I do, they will notice. If you do not, Sabrina said, they will move you and erase you somewhere else. Owen's voice came tight. We can get one, but you have to be ready. The moment we pull it, alarms might trip. Jonas leaned in and whispered, we have 60 seconds before the drone cycle. Sabrina nodded. She spoke through the grate, fast and clear. I will wait. If alarms trigger, I leave. I will not get you killed by staying. Do you understand? Yes, Mara said. Sabrina waited, crouched in the red-lit corridor, listening to the mine's distant thunder and the closer sound of human breathing through metal. A minute passed, then two. Then a sharp click came from inside, followed by a muffled curse. A metal object slid against the grate. Something small fell onto the floor. Sabrina reached down and picked it up. It was a band, palm-sized, made of composite plastic and thin circuitry. It had no serial number and no safety label, just a smooth surface with one symbol pressed into it. A scarab. Kepri. Jonas's eyes widened. That is physical. That is enough to open a door, Sabrina said. The corridor's light flickered. A warning chirp sounded faintly above. They noticed, Jonas whispered. Sabrina pressed her recorder close to the vent. Mara. Owen. Listen. I have what I need. You stay alive. You do not fight them head-on. If they move you, memorize routes. If they separate you, keep names. I will come back with authority, or I will come back with chaos. Either way, I am coming back. Mara's voice was hoarse. Do not let them make us invisible. Sabrina stood. They cannot. Not anymore. They climbed the ladder, sealed the panel, and walked away at a normal pace as the drone floated into the corridor and paused, scanning. Sabrina kept her face blank. The drone's lens lingered on her badge, then moved on. Back in her cabin, Sabrina wrapped the band in cloth and logged it in her personal chain of custody file. She took photos and a short video of the scarab symbol. Then she recorded a verbal statement with the time, place, method of acquisition, and witness. She spoke slowly, as if she were already in a chamber with 1,000 eyes. Then she sent a secure packet to Director Cho. Within minutes, Cho called. You did what? Cho demanded eyes fulasing. I retrieved a device used to overwrite worker identity, Sabrina said. It bears Kepri's crest. It is physical evidence that the workers are being processed as units. Cho stared at her, as if weighing whether to praise her or fire her. Sabrina, if this is obtained unlawfully, they will attack the chain of custody. I documented everything, Sabrina said, and if they want to argue legality, they will have to explain why that device exists. Then. All right, get to the council station. You leave today. Will Earth back me? Sabrina asked. Just a heartbeat. Sabrina caught it anyway. We will back the principal, Cho said carefully. And we will try to back you. Try. The words sat between them like a knife. Sabrina nodded once. That is enough. Before she left, Verkale insisted on a departure check. 2 guards escorted her and Jonas back to Dock 3. Verkale himself waited by the airlock, posture relaxed. Inspector Thorne, he said. I hear Earth requested a review. They did, Sabrina said. Verkale's eyes shimmered in the dock lights. You have stirred unnecessary noise. I found living people behind sealed doors, Sabrina said. Noise is the least of it. Ilya Soren stepped closer. Sabrina, he said softly, using her first name like a friend. You are smart. You know how systems work. You know Veronine is not a moral seminar. It is a supply node. Do not try to turn it into a crusade. The council will protect stability. Sabrina met his gaze. Then the council needs to hear what stability costs. Ilya's smile faded. Be careful. You are not as protected as you think. Sabrina passed through the airlock without answering. Leaving the mine did not end the fight. It only changed the arena. The next stage would be cleaner, brighter, and more dangerous, because this time the lie would be defended in public. The shuttle ride to the council station took 6 hours through mapped lanes glittering with traffic, freighters, patrol craft, and private yachts. Civilization in motion. So much metal moving through space, and somewhere inside it, someone had decided that a human name was optional. Sabrina spent the flight building her testimony into something the Commerce Chamber could not brush aside. She learned the language she hated. Coercive labor conversion, non-active contractual assets, trade protection carve-outs. Each term felt like a layer of paint over a bruise. She also read the trade protection framework itself, line by line. It was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. It claimed to prevent disruption in key supply chains. It allowed temporary labor reclassification in emergencies. It required disputes to be handled internally before outside oversight could destabilize commerce. The words were smooth. The implications were brutal. At the end of the document, Sabrina found a footnote referencing the contractual extinguishment doctrine, Council Memorandum 77B. The doctrine had a name. It had a memo. This was not a rogue mine. This was policy. When the shuttle docked at the council station, an enormous ring habitat above a gas giant, Sabrina stepped out into a corridor that smelled like clean air and politics. Flags and sigils hung from the walls. Species moved in dignified streams, their security details trailing behind. Sabrina adjusted her jacket and walked forward. She was tired. She was outmatched. She was a labor inspector with dirt still in her boots. And in 2 days, she would stand in front of the Galaxy Council's Commerce Chamber and force them to hear a phrase they had written, a phrase that turned living humans into legal nothing. Contractually extinguished. For the first time since she had arrived on Veronine, Sabrina felt a flicker of fear that had nothing to do with guards or drones. It was the fear of speaking truth to a system that had made itself allergic to it. She pushed the fear down and kept walking. Before the first session, Earth's delegation put Sabrina through a short, brutal rehearsal. They sat her in a narrow briefing room with a translation console and a timer. 2 aides played the roles of hostile counsel. One played a sympathetic delegate who kept trying to pull her into moral grandstanding. Cho watched without interrupting. Say where you were. An aide snapped. Say why you were there. Say what you saw. No po uitri. Sabrina answered again and again, each time trimming her language until it sounded like steel. When she slipped into anger, they stopped her. Anger makes you sloppy, Cho said at last. Sloppy is what they want. Outside the briefing room, the station's public corridors were already buzzing. News clips looped on wall displays. One headline called Earth a saboteur of a critical supply node. Another pundit called Sabrina a reckless bureaucrat. A market analyst warned of shipyard slowdowns. None of them said the 42 workers' names. Jonas watched one clip with a tight face. They're making you a villain. They're making a story the market can digest, Sabrina said. A villain is simpler than the rule they do not want people to notice. Her comm pinged with a message forwarded from Earth's labor unions. The subject line was simple. We see you. The body contained a list of names, families asking if their missing relatives were among the 42. Sabrina read the names twice, then closed the message before it could crack her focus. Later that night, a clerk from the Commerce Chamber approached Cho in a corridor and handed over a sealed packet with Vaylor's pre-hearing questions. Sabrina read them on a bench under a hanging banner of the council. The questions were not about suffering. They were about definitions. The first asked what counted as a sentient labor entity under trade doctrine. The second asked what could trigger an emergency reclassification. The third asked whether a living body still carried legal standing or whether only the contract mattered. Sabrina felt the shape of the fight. Vaylor was not going to be persuaded by outrage. He was going to be persuaded by a contradiction the chamber could not reconcile in public. She looked up at the station's ceiling, at the clean lights and polished metal, and thought of the red corridor under Veronine's rock. Tomorrow, she would have to speak in the language of the system while refusing its excuses. That was the only way to make the system admit what it had been doing. The morning of the hearing, the goal was simple. Sabrina had to walk into the chamber, keep the fight focused on the rule itself, and stop Khepri from turning the whole case into a story about one inspector breaking rules. The Commerce Chamber did not look like a courtroom. It looked like an exchange floor dressed in marble. Sabrina walked into the antechamber with Director Cho and 2 aides from Earth's delegation. Cho moved with the restrained urgency of someone who knew every second was being recorded. The aides carried data slates, legal briefs, and a small sealed case with Sabrina's evidence band inside. Across the room, Khepri Combine's legal team waited in a neat cluster. Ilya Soren stood at their center, calm as ever. Beside him stood Varkale, now wearing a formal sash that marked him as an operational witness. Behind them, a group of non-human officials in silver badges, Veronine-packed auditors, watched Sabrina with the detached interest of people inspecting a tool. Sabrina's name was already circulating. She could feel in the glances. A human inspector, a supply chain disruptor, a nuisance. Cho leaned close. Remember, we keep this about the rule they used. We do not let them collapse it into Inspector Thorne broke rules. Sabrina nodded. I know. You do not sound nervous, Cho said. I am saving it, Sabrina replied. A bell chimed. A door slid open. An attendant motioned. The chamber beyond was vast, tiered, and bright. Delegates sat behind curved desks, each desk inset with translation lights. At the center stood a long platform with 3 seats elevated above it. The Commerce Chamber's presiding panel. The middle seat belonged to Seth Vaylor. Vaylor was not human. His species had pale skin and eyes like polished stone. His expression was neutral in a way that made Sabrina uneasy. Neutral could be fairness or indifference. Sometimes they looked identical until the verdict. Proceed, Vaylor said, voice amplified but not loud. We convene this review under the Trade Protection Framework. Case designation Veronine Workforce Reclassification. Reclassification, not disappearance. Vaylor's gaze fell on Sabrina. Earth's witness is present. Cho stepped forward. Honored panel, Earth petitions this chamber to review the legality and ethics of Khepri Combine's labor conversion practices on Veronine. 42 Earth citizens were removed from payroll and reclassified in a way that stripped their rights while keeping their labor output. Vaylor's eyes did not change. Khepri Combine, response. Ilya Soren rose with smooth confidence. Honored panel, Khepri Combine operates under Council-recognized trade protection. Veronine is a critical extraction node supporting Veronine shipyards and frontier stabilization. Earth's inspector interfered with lawful internal review processes, entered restricted sectors, and now seeks to weaponize selective testimony to destabilize commerce. Sabrina could hear the language he chose. Lawful. Internal. Destabilize. He was not arguing about people. He was arguing about order. Vaylor held up a hand. This chamber will examine both procedural conduct and the rule itself. Inspector Thorne stepped forward. Sabrina walked to the platform's edge. The chamber lights felt like a sun in her face. She made herself breathe. Stay inside your own head. Stay clear. State your name and role, Vaylor said. Sabrina Thorne, Labor Inspector for Earth's Civil Workforce Authority. My job is to verify safety, wage, and rights compliance for Earth citizens employed off-world under signed labor access clauses. Vaylor's head tilted slightly. You traveled to Veronine because of missing payroll entries. Yes. 42 human workers were removed from payroll. Their required safety rings still transmitted live biotelemetry. A murmur ran through the chamber. Not outrage. Interest. Ilya's voice cut in. Biotelemetry proves they were alive. Not that they were unlawfully detained. Vaylor raised a hand again. Inspector, describe what you requested and what you received. Sabrina spoke in clean steps, the way she had trained for depositions. I requested physical verification. It was denied under trade protection. I requested camera footage. It was blanked. I requested access logs. I was blocked. Meal rations continued to be drawn, and ventilation and waste loads pointed to a hidden population in an inactive sector. Vaylor's gaze sharpened a fraction. And then I entered a service access corridor to confirm whether Earth citizens were being held. Ilya spread his hands. By her own admission, she trespassed. Sabrina did not look at him. She looked at Vaylor. I did, because without confirmation the dispute would have stayed trapped in paperwork. And the paperwork was being used to erase people. Vaylor's voice remained smooth. This chamber notes your admission. Now present your substantive claim. Sabrina exhaled slowly. The workers were not dead. They were still laboring. But they had been reclassified as contractually extinguished, which meant they were erased on paper while still physically present, so they could be used without wages, without rights, and without visibility. The phrase landed. Sabrina watched faces shift as translators pushed meaning through different tongues. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. Contractually extinguished is a doctrine term. It has a defined application. Yes, Sabrina said, and Veronine is applying it to human workers. Ilya's tone stayed mild. The inspector is using inflammatory interpretation. Extinguishment refers to contract status, not personhood. Sabrina felt heat rise, but she kept her voice level. Then why do the workers still wear rings? Why do their bodies still show on medical telemetry? Why do their names vanish while their output remains? Vaylor held up a hand. Evidence. Cho nodded to an aide, who carried the sealed case forward. The aide placed it on the chamber clerk's desk. The clerk opened it with a scanner and lifted the band Sabrina had taken from the service corridor. The scarab symbol gleamed under the lights. Sabrina's stomach tightened. This was the moment everything could break. If the panel dismissed the chain of custody, the story would collapse into a procedural slapdown, and those workers would vanish into an unlisted corridor forever. Vaylor's gaze fixed on a band. Origin. Sabrina spoke carefully. Retrieved from a worker in the restricted sector. Used to overwrite identity markers in Kepri's internal labor system. A documented chain of custody personally. Ilya's smile returned, thin. Retrieved unlawfully. Cho stepped forward. Honored panel, Earth submits that the unlawful act was not the retrieval. It was the creation and deployment of a device designed to nullify worker identity under trade protection. Vaylor's eyes flicked to Ilya. Kepri combined. Does this device exist in your operations? Ilya hesitated for the first time. Not long. Just long enough for the chamber to notice. It is a routing tag, he said. A standard industrial tool used to synchronize ring telemetry to shift allocations. To erase names? Sabrina asked before she could stop herself. Vaylor's gaze snapped to her. Inspector, restraint. Sabrina held her tongue. She could feel adrenaline pushing at her, and she forced it back into order. Vaylor turned to the auditors in silver badges. Orinon packed representation. Do you recognize this tag? A tall auditor rose. Their voice was clipped. We recognize the crest. Kepri Combine uses such tags to align workforce data under emergency reclassification provisions. Vaylor's eyes held steady. Emergency. Define. The auditor's head tilted. Supply disruption risk. Security incidents. Labor instability. Sabrina felt the trap forming. They would claim an emergency, and emergency would justify the whole thing. Vaylor looked back to Sabrina. What emergency existed on Veronine? Sabrina's voice stayed calm. None that justified erasing living workers on paper. Ilya interjected smoothly. There was labor instability, work stoppage threats, and a critical shipment schedule. Sabrina's fists clenched. She opened them. Vaylor's tone was measured. Inspector, you have alleged coercive labor conversion. Present direct testimony. Sabrina activated her recorder and played a short audio clip. Owen's voice came through, rough and exhausted. We are alive. That is their line. Alive means the contract is fulfilled. Then a second clip. Mara's voice. They made us disappear because we were cheap. The chamber's translators lit, converting pain into multiple languages. A murmur ran again, louder this time. It carried discomfort. Ilya's face tightened, but he kept his posture. Unverified. Emotional. Sabrina's mind flashed to the sealed cabin doors. They're verified names. I can provide 10 identities with Earth citizen records. The rest can be verified with ring IDs. If this chamber orders inspection, you can confirm all 42. Vaylor's gaze slid to Varkale. Overseer, are the workers accessible for inspection? Varkale rose slowly. Under trade protection, access is restricted during internal review. Vaylor's eyes stayed on him. Answer the question. Varkale's through what Platius Fleck said. They exist. The single word hit harder than denial. Exist. Not employees. Not citizens. Just exist. Sabrina felt a cold satisfaction. He had said it in the chamber. He could not unsay it. Vaylor leaned back slightly. This chamber will consider ordering inspection. Before that, we examine the doctrine itself. He tapped a control. A text excerpt appeared above the platform. Council Memorandum 77B, Contractual Extinguishment Doctrine. The words floated like a legal halo. Vaylor read aloud in an even voice. In circumstances where contractual entity status is nullified for the preservation of trade stability, the entity's rights and obligations under the contract are suspended. Biological continuity is not determinative. The chamber fell quiet. Sabrina felt the room's attention sharpen. Vaylor was not accusing anyone yet. He was making them listen. Sabrina's mouth went dry. Hearing the doctrine read aloud felt like hearing someone recite the instructions for a weapon. Vaylor looked at Ilya. Council Soren, is Kepri applying Memorandum 77B to human labor? Ilya held his smile, but it no longer reached his eyes. We apply council-recognized frameworks, yes. An Earth signed into the trade protection framework, Vaylor said, gaze shifting to Cho. Therefore, Earth accepted the possibility of such reclassification. Cho's face hardened. Earth accepted emergency contract reclassification. Earth did not accept the conversion of living citizens into legal nothing for routine production. Vaylor's eyes stayed neutral. The distinction is the heart of the review. Sabrina felt the ground shift under her feet. They were moving toward the worst possible argument. Earth had consented. Earth had signed. Therefore, Earth had no standing to complain. Ilya seized it. Honored panel, Earth wants the benefits of integration without the costs. They signed the framework. Their own inspector violated it. Now they ask you to punish a critical node for using lawful tools. Sabrina's pulse rose. She looked at Cho. Cho's jaw was tight. This was the moment Sabrina had planned for, but still dreaded. The part where Earth's own past would be used as a club. She stepped forward, voice steady. I want to be clear. Earth did sign. And Earth signed out of necessity when it needed frontier stability and supply access. That was a mistake. But a mistake does not mean the doctrine is moral. And it does not mean this chamber should protect its misuse. Vaylor's gaze sharpened. You admit Earth error. Sabrina nodded once. Yes, and I will explain it, because if you let the doctrine stand as written, you will not just erase contracts. You will erase the meaning of citizenship for any species that can be exploited under stability. A ripple moved through the delegates. Some leaned forward. Some leaned back. Vaylor lifted a hand. Inspector, you are making a political argument. I am making a person argument, Sabrina said. If stability requires legal disappearance, then the system is asking for bodies without accountability. For the first time, Vaylor's neutral mass cracked into something like curiosity. Proceed, he said. Sabrina drew a breath. This is not about one mind. Veronine is applying Memorandum 77B because the doctrine lets them. The doctrine says a living body is not enough on its own. Only the contract status matters. That is how you build a legal machine that can use someone until they collapse and then call it a non-active asset. Varkale's eyes shifted, irritation flickering. The auditors in silver badges watched as if Sabrina were exposing a seam in their armor. Vaylor leaned forward. If this chamber orders inspection and finds the workers laboring under extinguishment, what remedy do you seek? Sabrina's answer came without hesitation. Immediate restoration of legal status for the 42. Immediate access for Earth to extract its citizens. and a chamber directive that Memorandum 77B cannot be applied to living labor in routine commerce. A murmur rose again, louder this time, and edged with alarm. Not moral alarm, market alarm. The auditor rose. Honored panel. Such a directive would destabilize multiple supply chains. Sabrina met their gaze. Then your supply chains are built on disappearance. Vaylor's voice cut through the noise. Order. He tapped his control again. This chamber will recess for deliberation on inspection authority and interim measures. As attendants moved, Sabrina felt her legs tremble for the first time. She kept her posture straight anyway. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her strain. Cho stepped close, voice low. You did something dangerous. I told the truth, Sabrina said. Cho's eyes flicked to Ilya across the room. They will hit back. I am counting on it, Sabrina said. Because if they hit back, they would have to reveal what they were protecting. And if they revealed it, the chamber would have to decide whether stability mattered more than the line they had just heard aloud. During the recess, the next objective became clear. Sabrina needed the chamber to do more than argue. She needed it to inspect. She waited through the break with her hands folded and her thoughts sharp. Somewhere under Veronine's rock, 42 rings kept pulsing. She had to make sure those pulses became names again before the system decided to silence the heartbeats and call it industrial inevitability. The recess lasted 93 minutes. Sabrina measured it by the ache in her shoulders and the slow burn in her throat from holding her voice steady in recycled air. When the attendants returned and the chamber reassembled, Vaylor's panel took their seats without ceremony. The market screens above the chamber had updated during the break. Cargo indices, shipyard forecasts, small red arrows that meant money was already nervous. Vaylor looked down at the delegates. This chamber has reviewed preliminary submissions. We will issue 2 determinations. First, whether inspection authority will be exercised. Second, whether interim measures are required to prevent irreparable harm. He paused, eyes moving over Earth's delegation, then Kepri's. Inspection authority is granted, Vaylor said. A shockwave ran through the chamber. The Veronine auditor stiffened. Ilya's face stayed composed, but Sabrina saw the tension in his jaw. Vaylor continued. A neutral inspection team will enter Veronine's restricted sector within 24 hours. The team will verify the status of the 42 Earth citizens identified by ring telemetry and by name submissions. Sabrina let herself inhale fully for the first time in what felt like days. Varkale rose, voice controlled. Honored panel. The restricted sector contains hazardous equipment. Inspection risks safety and production stability. Vaylor's gaze did not waver. Safety is a priority. That is why we will inspect. Then Vaylor's tone shifted, slightly colder. Until inspection is complete, no reclassification transfers may occur. No workforce relocation of the affected individuals will be permitted. He corrected himself mid-phrase, as if the correction mattered, then looked straight at Varkale. Humans are not cargo, Vaylor said. Sabrina felt the chamber hold its breath. The line was simple. It was not a grand speech. That was why it landed. Ilya stood smoothly. Honored panel, we object to language that prejudges the doctrine. Vaylor's eyes were hard now. Council, the chamber has not yet ruled on doctrine, but it can prevent disappearance while it decides. Sabrina's hands trembled under the table. She folded them tighter. The inspection order was not victory. It was a doorway, but doorways mattered. After the session, Cho pulled Sabrina aside into a quiet corridor lined with diplomatic banners. You got inspection, Cho said, voice low. That is more than I expected. It is not enough, Sabrina said. Cho studied her. You are thinking ahead. They will sabotage. If they cannot move bodies, they will move paperwork. They will claim the workers consented. Or they will claim Earth waived rights. Or they will shut down the sector and try to make the inspection find no active labor. Joshua Malta, Titan, we have leverage now. Use it carefully. Sabrina looked down the corridor where other delegations moved like schools of fish. Leverage is only leverage if you are willing to pull. Salet, Sabrina, you have already put yourself on a cliff edge. The council can still sanction you for unauthorized entry. I know. If they have to punish me to protect their pride, they will. Joshua, good shop in. Then why are you still pushing? Sabrina thought of the tapping behind cabin 17, of Mara's voice asking if she was human, of Owen's question, what if Earth would not fight? Because if I do not, the next doctrine will be worse. Cho said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded once. All right, we prepare for the second session. They will try to frame this as Earth's hypocrisy. They are not wrong, Sabrina said. Earth signed. Cho's eyes narrowed. You're going to say that again? Sabrina met her gaze. Yes, but I'm going to say what it cost. The chamber had opened the door. Now Sabrina needed the inspection to make the truth impossible to walk back. What came next would decide whether the first hearing had changed anything or only delayed the burial. The inspection team arrived at Veronine on schedule. Sabrina watched the live feed from the council station's secure monitoring room, surrounded by aides and legal observers. The inspectors were a mixed group of 3 species, all wearing neutral badges and rigid expressions. On the screen, Doc 3 looked the same. Clean, efficient, normal. Varkael greeted the inspectors with practiced respect. Ilya Soren stood beside him, smiling. The inspectors requested access to Sector C. Varkael delayed with safety briefings. The inspectors insisted. When the doors finally opened and the team moved down into the service corridor, Sabrina's mouth went dry. The feed flickered as the signal bounced through rock. Then the image steadied. A red-lit corridor. Pipes. The grated vent. The inspectors pried it open. Inside, a low room appeared with concrete, metal bunks, and a thin line of workers standing with their heads up like people who had been trained not to hope. Mara Devane stepped forward first. She did not look like a criminal. She looked like a tired mother. The lead inspector asked for names. Mara gave hers. Owen Rivas gave his. Others followed. As each name was spoken, a clerk on the inspection team cross-checked ring. IDs. 42 rings. 42 pulses. Then the inspector asked the question that mattered most. Are you employed? Owen's laugh was short and bitter. According to them? No. According to our bodies? Yes. Mara lifted her arm. A faint bruise circled the wrist where the ring sat. They said we were converted. They said we were non-active. They said we were not people who could be paid, only bodies that could be used. The feed caught Ilya's face in the background. The smile had vanished. The inspection team recorded everything. They photographed the bands under the suits, the scarab tags identical to Sabrina's evidence. They documented the work schedule pinned to the wall. They counted the ration crates. They checked medical readings and saw exhaustion trending toward collapse. By the time the inspection ended, the room's silence had changed. It was no longer a hidden silence. It was the silence of a fact that could not be put back in its box. Sabrina sat back in her chair and let her lungs fill. Jonas, beside her, wiped his eyes quickly and pretended he had not. They saw. Jonas whispered. Yes, Sabrina said. Now the council has to decide what a contract means when it can erase a living person. The next day, the second session opened. This time the goal was even clearer. The workers had been found. Now Sabrina had to make sure the chamber could not hide behind procedure and leave the doctrine intact. The second session was larger and broadcast across the Commerce Chamber's public channels. That was deliberate. The council wanted the optics of transparency. Earth wanted the pressure of witnesses. Kepri wanted to control the narrative before it turned into something the market could not swallow. Sabrina stood on the platform again. This time, she could feel the audience beyond the chamber, millions across multiple systems watching a human labor inspector talk about doctrine. Vaylor's voice cut through the hum. This chamber has received inspection findings. 42 Earth citizens were located in a restricted sector, alive, and under documented labor output schedules while classified as contractually extinguished. The words were clinical. The effect was not. Ilya rose, posture immaculate. Honored panel, the inspection confirms the workers were alive and sheltered. Their output schedules were part of a transitional stabilization process. No physical coercion was recorded. Sabrina's stomach tightened. Here it was. The pivot. If there was no physical coercion, they would call it consent. Vaylor's gaze slid to Sabrina. Inspector Thorne, your response. Sabrina spoke slowly. If you erase a person's legal existence, you do not need chains. You just need hunger and silence. Coercion can be written into a contract so cleanly that no bruises are required. A murmur rose from the chamber's public gallery. Vaylor held up a hand. Counsel Soren, does Kepri assert these workers consented to extinguishment? Ilya's smile returned, faint. They signed employment contracts that included trade protection provisions. Under Memorandum 77B, contract status can be suspended. The workers remained biologically safe. Their contractual rights were paused for stability. Sabrina felt her anger sharpen into something colder. She stepped forward. Honored panel, let me say this clearly. Earth did sign trade protection. Earth signed because in that year the frontier was bleeding, and the Veronine shipyards were the only ones capable of producing the rescue hulls Earth needed to evacuate colonies. Earth traded paper safety for real ships. Cho stiffened behind her. Sabrina heard the intake of breath from the gallery. Sabrina continued. That was a compromise. It was not a surrender of personhood. The doctrine you wrote, the idea that a living body is not enough on its own, turns compromise into a license to use a sentient being while pretending the law no longer sees them. Vaylor's eyes held steady. You accuse this chamber of writing a doctrine that enables coerced labor. I accuse this chamber of writing a doctrine that enables disappearance, Sabrina said. And I accuse Kepri Combine and the Veronine Pact of using it not for emergencies, but for profit. The auditor rose, voice sharp. Profit is not a crime. Stability is not optional. Sabrina looked at them. Then you should have the courage to say what you are. Stabilizing. Say it out loud. Your shipyards run smoother when humans can be erased on paper. The chamber went quiet. Even the translators seemed to hesitate, as if reluctant to carry the sentence into other tongues. Vaylor leaned forward. Inspector, you are pressing for a doctrinal revision. Propose it. Sabrina had prepared the language all night. She hated that she had, but she knew this was how systems changed, with words crafted like bolts. She spoke clearly. Earth proposes a chamber directive. Memorandum 77B may not be applied to living labor performed by sentient beings in routine commerce. If a being is biologically active and performing labor, they retain personhood status and minimum rights, including name recognition, wage obligation, medical oversight, and outside inspection access. Emergency suspension may apply only to corporate obligations, not to sentient rights. Ilya's smile froze. That would fracture trade protection. It would clean it, Sabrina said. Trade protection should protect trade, not protect disappearance. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. Counsel Soren, response. Ilya spread his hands. Honored panel, if you accept this proposal, you will trigger contract cascades across multiple sectors. Veronine shipyards will slow. Frontier stability will be threatened. Earth itself will suffer. Sabrina looked at him. Yes, because your stability has been discounted by hidden costs. You build a system where the price is paid by people who could be erased. When you stop erasing them, the real cost appears. The words felt dangerous. They were. They told the chamber its economy was lying. Vaylor turned to the other two panel members. They conferred in silence, their heads close and their gestures small. Then Vaylor looked back at the room. This chamber recognizes, he said slowly, that doctrine exists to stabilize commerce, not to negate sentient standing. The inspection findings demonstrate that Memorandum 77B has been applied in a manner that produces legal nullity while sustaining labor extraction. He paused. The whole chamber seemed to lean forward. Therefore, this chamber issues a directive. Effective immediately, contractual extinguishment may not be applied to sentient labor where biological continuity and active output are present. Such beings retain minimum rights, including name recognition, wage obligations, and outside inspection access. Trade protection clauses may not supersede these minima. For half a second, the chamber held a silence so complete Sabrina could hear her own blood. Then noise exploded. Shouts in multiple languages, aides speaking into comms, auditors demanding objections. Vaylor raised a hand. Order. His voice cut through. Additionally, Kepri Combine is ordered to restore the 42 Earth citizens to active legal status, compensate withheld wages under chamber oversight, and permit Earth extraction of its citizens within 72 hours. Veronine-packed auditors will undergo review for complicity. Ilya's face had gone pale. Kale stood rigid, as if the words had turned his bones into metal. Sabrina felt a strange sensation, not triumph, but relief that did not have a place to land. Because she knew what the directive meant. It meant markets would shake. It meant contracts would be rewritten. It meant someone, somewhere, would try to find a new loophole. But for this moment, the system had been forced to say it. A heartbeat mattered. The legal win was real. But Sabrina would not trust it until she saw the workers walk back into open air. After the session, Sabrina walked out into the station's wide corridor and let the noise fade behind her. Jonas followed, quiet. Cho caught up to them, face unreadable. You just changed doctrine, Cho said. We did, Sabrina corrected. Cho's eyes softened slightly. You cost us. There will be trade pressure. There will be retaliation. Sabrina nodded. I know. And you saved 42 people, Cho said, voice lower. Maybe more, because others will come forward now that they know the loophole is closing. Sabrina did not answer immediately. She pictured Mara stepping into the inspection light. Owen saying his name like it mattered. I want to see them walk out, Sabrina said. 70 hours later, on Dock 3 of Veronine, Sabrina stood again in the same glass-walled intake booth, watching the thin, green line of a heartbeat crawl across a monitor. This time, the ledger beside it showed the name. It displayed a simple line that read, Owen Rivas. Active. Earth citizen. 42 workers stood in a loose line on the dock, their faces gaunt and their posture wary. Some carried small bags. Some carried nothing. Mara stood near the front with her shoulders set hard, as if she still did not trust open air to remain open. Jonas stood beside Sabrina, silent for once. They look smaller up here, he said. No, Sabrina said. They just look like people again. Earth's shuttle waited with its boarding ramp down. Medical staff moved carefully through the line, checking wrists, scanning rings, speaking names out loud before guiding each worker forward. Names. That was what Sabrina noticed most. Every few seconds, another name entered the air and stayed there. Owen stepped to the monitor window and glanced at the screen. He saw his own name on the ledger, then looked at Sabrina. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he gave one small nod. Not gratitude exactly. Something steadier than that. Recognition. Mara came next. There was color returning to her face now, though she still looked exhausted. They told us all morning that this was temporary processing, she said. Sabrina gave a tired half-smile. I know. Mara looked past her, toward the dock, the cameras, the Kepri insignia on steel. I kept waiting for someone to say the words and make us disappear again. They cannot do that the same way now, Sabrina said. Mara held her gaze. No, not the same way. That was honest enough for both of them. As the boarding ramp lowered for the Earth shuttle, Sabrina felt her calm buzz. A message from the Commerce Chamber clerk. A formal notice appeared on her comm, informing her that a procedural review of her unauthorized entry was pending and that sanctions might limit her future inspection authority. Sabrina stared at the message. Then she locked her comm and slipped it back in her pocket. Jonas saw her face. They are coming for you, he whispered. They can, Sabrina said. Systems always demand a price. Jonas's voice shook. Are you scared? Sabrina watched Mara step onto the ramp. She watched Owen follow. She watched the line of 42 humans move toward open air like people relearning the shape of freedom. Yes, Sabrina said, but I am not sorry. She looked up at the dock ceiling, at the cameras, at the industrial lights, and at the scarab crest painted on steel. In the end, she had not won by humiliating anyone. She had not won by finding a secret superweapon. She had not won by outpunching a stronger species. She had won by forcing a system to face its own words, out loud and in public. The chamber had said them. It had taken them back. Somewhere in the Galaxy Council's archives, Memorandum 77B would now carry a new line. Sentient labor retains minimum rights. It was a small sentence in a massive bureaucracy. But Sabrina had learned long ago that small sentences were sometimes the only thing standing between a human being and the void. As the shuttle doors closed and Veronine's dock receded behind glass, Sabrina let herself rest her forehead against the window for the first time since she had arrived. The heartbeat line on the monitor kept crawling. This time, it had a name. In the end, what shook the Galaxy Council was not just a broken contract. It was the moment they were forced to face a harder truth. A system can survive corruption for a long time. It can survive silence even longer. But the moment it starts erasing people to protect its profits, it begins to rot from the inside. Sabrina Thorne did not walk into that chamber as the most powerful person in the room. She walked in as one woman carrying the names, the pain, and the dignity of those the system tried to bury. And in doing so, she reminded the galaxy of something it had almost forgotten. Humanity is not cheap. Humanity is not disposable. And humanity does not disappear just because someone changes the paperwork. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why these battles matter, please like the video, share it with someone who loves powerful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more stories where humanity stands its ground against the stars. Until the next story, take care of yourselves, and never let anyone convince you that a human life can be measured like cargo.